You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم هناك لشوارزنيجر.
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, golazo, golazo.
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Welcome to Wednesday. It's Wednesday, right?
It is. It's Wednesday, 2 days after FIFA. Well, 36 hours after FIFA.
How's it going? How's Alex doing?
Alex is doing pretty good. Still with Newcastle, but coming off of 3 games in a row with braces. So it actually feeling good. Braces, no, not in his mouth because he's 17 years old, but on the pitch because I can't stop scoring. That's how Alex Hunter is doing right now.
All right. So he's ripping it up for Newcastle, is he?
Yes, unfortunately, still with Newcastle, but we're mid-December, and there is some rumblings that Chelsea might recall him in the January window. So we'll see what happens. We'll keep an eye, and we'll keep you informed of what's going on with my Alex Hunter.
Quick question with that. When you play like a career-type mode on that, if you get promoted with Newcastle, would Newcastle play the Premier League in the next season of the game, or do they just stick with the same?
No, they would play in the Premier League next season.
Oh, okay. So we'll have to see that.
Like Duane, I took Luton Town from the League 2 to the Premier League last year.
Oh, well, Luton Town.
The Hatters. Come on. Remember a few years ago where Norwich was in the Premier League and Luton Town beat them being in the Blue Conference? Oh, that was the greatest moment in the Hatters history.
Well, John Carver played for them for a while. That was John Carver's team, former TFC manager that everyone loved so much. He was one of the more entertaining characters in TFC history, which is saying a lot. But at any rate, speaking of entertaining characters, some news came out. I'm the king of segues. Some news came out today or yesterday, I guess it would have been, that Clint Dempsey has been sat down for the season. Now, we've talked about this a couple times before. Everyone sort of knows by now, but if you don't, they found an irregular heartbeat, something with his heart that wasn't quite right. So quite naturally, they chose his health, his long-term health, over any soccer-related issues, and just shut him down. Yeah. And they're continuing to do that. There was some brief hope a couple weeks ago, or a week or so ago, that he may be able to come back. He trained for a couple days, but in the end, they just decided that his long-term health was more important, Kevin.
The risk, and what happens in those situations is there's no middle ground. It's either you're going to be fine or you might drop dead while playing soccer. So it's kind of hard to take any chance in that situation.
No, precisely. And I mean, we've seen cases where heart defects have caused players to have pretty serious outcomes, including death. And obviously, we're not suggesting, and we're not doctors. We're not medical doctors here, so we don't know exactly what it is that Clint Dempsey is suffering from right now. So I'm not prepared to say that it could be fatal, because I don't know. I'm not saying that at all. But certainly, it's serious enough that they feel that they need to shut him down. And I think that says something. And I think that says good things about the choices that are being made in Seattle as well, because it's very easy in this world of high risk-reward sports to push players to the limit.
I'll make an analogy for you, Duane. Yes, I'm going to plug Hardwood Radio from yesterday with Ben and myself. We talked about the Chris Bosh situation where he has blood clot in his lungs, and there's a chance those blood clots can get unclogged from the lungs and travel up the bloodstreams and cause aneurysm or cause a heart attack. He's been shut down and released, basically found a way. Miami said, you're never going to play with us again. And for insurance reasons, it's going to be tough for him to play anywhere else in the NBA. And yes, it's not the same medical situation, but in a way, Clint Dempsey is going to have that problem too, where will anybody want to take a chance? So unfortunately, it does seem like it's a swan song for Clint Dempsey right now.
Yeah. again, not being a medical doctor, with that caveat, certainly that the noises coming out of Seattle are ominous when it comes to his future career. And he's had a great career. So, and he has a lot of money. I mean, you'd think, I don't know how he spends it, but certainly he's made enough money over his career that he should be pretty comfortable for the rest of his life. I would suspect that him being who he is and his personality, he's a pretty outgoing guy. Of course, he has his little rap stuff that he does and so on and so forth, that he could probably find some form of media work out there if that was something that interested him. So I would suspect that this might be the end of Clint Dempsey. And you're going to have to, just like the Heat did with Chris Bosh, you're going to have to make some tough decisions on the roster side of things in the offseason if you're the Seattle Sounders and you're not entirely certain in terms of what Dempsey can bring to you. Because, unlike the NBA, where the Heat could have probably carried his salary and just paid the luxury tax if they were so inclined, Seattle can't, right? They have, the cap's a bit weird in MLS, as we all know, but nonetheless, that DP type salary on there is going to handicap them in their ability to build a roster for next year if he's not going to play. So we will find out fairly quickly, I would suspect, whether Clint Dempsey is in fact shut down. Now, you hate to be cold about it, but certainly it does have an impact on the playoff race within the Western Conference. Seattle is 3 points back of Portland right now with 2 games in hand. Jordan Morris, thankfully for them, has been doing pretty well recently. So the speculation really is that maybe this won't hurt them all that much in the pitch this year. But nonetheless, I think that it has to be a bit jarring for them to lose a player like Dempsey like this. Although they may also, Kevin, they may use it as like, oh, that's win one for the clincher. You know what I mean?
And maybe Clint's going to be fine next year coming back. That's not out of the question as well. We have seen athletes with irregular heartbeat problem come back from it and come back as good as they were. So that's another possibility. Let's not forget. Let's not just always but let's not say that he's going to retire for sure. We don't know. It's speculation at this point, but it does seem ominous. When you're looking at his statistics with the Sounders, yes, it's already been 4 seasons. He came in late 2013 for the Sounders, and the way they did it, Duane, do you remember? He was presented in front of the crowd. He was dressed normal. There was some rumbling, but there was still that element of surprise.
Yeah, he leaked on Twitter first. Someone found a picture of him in the airport,
but still, he was not sure. And then just takes the coat off. Oh, and behold, he's wearing a Seattle Sounders jersey.
Yeah, it was funny, and I think that they did that. If you do remember, if you're new to following this, it was in fact a Seattle fan was at the airport and saw Clint Dempsey standing there, and he walked up to him and he said, "Oh, what are you doing, Clint?" Because it was in the summer, right? So it was shouldn't you be going back to London? And he played it coy at that point, said he was in town for business or something. I forget exactly what it was. And
technically, he's not lying. He was in town for business.
Exactly, but he put the photo went out and it went viral pretty quickly, and I think that the Sounders knew that the cat was out of the bag at that point, so they had a little fun with it in the press in the reveal that he was in fact coming.
But it was very interesting, and let's look at statistically his first season back, because he did play from 2004 2006 with the Revolution. In 2013, 9 games played, 6 goals scored, 6 game goals scored. Anyways. It's hard to look at the statistics chart on MLSsoccer.com, but games played, all games started. So 6 games started, 1 goal. It wasn't, but the best season he had was in 2014, 15 goals in 26 game played. 23 of those were starts, 10 assists as well, a 113 shot, almost 60% on target. You do have those great statistics in 14-15 for Clint Dempsey, where the Seattle Sounders were at their best maybe ever, with Clint Dempsey and Oba Martins at his side at that time.
Yeah, he did start pretty slow in MLS. That is something that we kind of forget now. And I think that Clint Dempsey, that's moved to my sports podcasting network, Soccer Today question of the day, which was, where does Clint Dempsey rank in the history of U.S. soccer? I gave 4 options, as I usually do. The first option was simply a GOAT. So if you're not hip with the new lingo of the day, it's the greatest
of all time.
Greatest of all time. There's a lot of GOATs out there. I think maybe we're overusing GOAT, but nonetheless.
Yes, well, there can only be one, and so if you use more than one in any given sport, you're actually overmaking it.
Yes, exactly. But anyway, so the GOAT was the first option on there. All-time U.S. starting 11 was my second option there. Top 20-ish all-time U.S. So I was kind of doing like you'd be an all-time U.S. starter versus
reserve, or substitute.
Yeah, versus a reserve player. And then the final option was decent but overrated. And I think that it's very difficult to evaluate Clint Dempsey. And I was thinking this myself because his time in MLS has not been as good as maybe we thought it might be. And that's not to say it's been poor. But I think that when he came over, he was at what we felt the height of his powers, and a lot of people felt that he would really dominate Major League Soccer, and that really never came to pass. And I think that taints a lot of people's view of his overall time there. Quickly on the results, Kevin, and maybe you and I will talk about where he kind of ranks in our mind there. The GOAT people are 7%. And the decent but overrated people. So the two extremes of this are 8%. So only 15% for the extremes. As I figured, most people kind of fell in the middle, with 61% saying he would be a starting 11 player and 24% saying that he would just be a squad player on an all-time U.S. team.
I think that's fair.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I think it's a fair result. Especially if you include his time in the Premier League with Fulham, where he truly made his mark internationally, where he became Clint Dempsey. He got a name recognition by having success with Fulham, which was in the Premier League up until last year, 2 years ago. It's very that's the highlight of his career. It is his time in the Premier League,
and he's their all-time leading scorer, Fulham, in the Premier League. Not
exactly.
All-time.
Yeah, but which is still a good achievement for an American player to be the goal scoring leader of a club in the Premier League. So it is an achievement. It's a record. And that has happened in his career. So this is the highlight of his career. So we have to include that part when we talk about him, which we sometimes overlook that part, but he became a superstar in the world of soccer by having success in the Premier League in England. And for a North American player, it's not something that we're used to. It's not something that we see almost on a daily basis. It's not. And Clint Dempsey was one of the few with the Donovans of this world that achieved that.
Yeah, I'll give you a list of, let's say, six U.S. players that probably you could argue would be the best of all time. Landon Donovan, obviously, Claudio Reyna, Brad Friedel, Brian McBride, and Tim Howard would be and then I would add Clint Dempsey to that list. So I do think he's a top 11 player, absolutely. And he's complicated to completely put it. Reyna would be my pick. Perhaps there's some blue goggles when I say that. He is, of course, the club that he played the most for was Manchester City, so I'll put that out there. But I do think that his sort of tidy game that Reyna had was one that, again, with Reyna, we sort of lose touch at the end, because if you haven't been following MLS that long, you won't remember his time with the Red Bulls. It wasn't very memorable. He retired in the middle of the season because he clearly was done. So that kind of taints people's view, but he was a brilliant player and a very tidy player for a long time. Donovan, obviously, we don't need to talk about in any detail. We all know where Landon Donovan is, although I've always felt that he perhaps he's the quintessential American player in the sense that he's very athletic and very fast and all that sort of stuff. And he doesn't necessarily strike you as a footballer, but he is definitely a soccer player and a very good one. And he's difficult to rank that way. But
and his time with Everton showed us that as well, that he can play at the highest level and find a way to be effective. If it's not scoring, it's setting up goals, it's controlling the midfield, it's getting that movement going forward. The thing that he used to do with Everton that he helped, like let's face it, London Henovan help the status of the actual country in the world of football by helping that team up until 2010, and in 2010 with that moment and that goal. So you have great moments for London for him to be as well maybe considered one of the greatest of all time. So that's why I couldn't answer your Sports Podcast and Network Soccer Today question of the day with the GOAT. I had to go with the starting 11.
Yeah, look, and I wouldn't put him at the GOAT either. As I said, Reyna's my pick. Donovan, to me, again, it's obviously, look, I'm going to sound a bit Klinsmann-esque here. His time in Everton is a great measuring stick that allows us to imagine what he would have done, but I have trouble getting past the fact that he only did it for those periods of time and that he really did it on those two loan stints. And other than that, he was mostly an MLS player. And as much as I appreciate Major League Soccer, I do realistically put it in the world context, and would have liked to see Donovan do it more, which is why I put Reyna above, and why I might even put Dempsey above, because what Dempsey did, and this is what I will say about him, to take it back on him, and to finish my thought there, Brian McBride was a very sort of again, talk about quintessential Americans, but I think he's more of a kind of American that played, and I don't know if he's quite had the same talent as these other guys. And the keepers, I'm going to put on another shelf altogether, because I don't even know if you compare keepers to outfield players in many ways. But Dempsey's stretch at Fulham, when he was scoring all those goals, to me is the greatest stretch of period of time that an American's ever had. If you consolidate those 2-3 years, those peak performance years in Fulham, that to me was the highest that an American's ever done in Europe. I know it was for Fulham. Fulham was in the Premier League, but it's still kind of a lower level team. And I think most Americans dream of a time when their players are playing at a higher level. But I still think, based on all of the evidence out there, that no one has ever achieved what he did in the stretch that he did for as long as he did. And that's why I put him in the conversation. But then it gets tainted, as I've said already, by when he came back to MLS, and he certainly didn't have the same impact when he came back. It was good, but it wasn't great. And that's where I put him. The people that are answering decent but overrated, I suspect, are Portland fans, because that's not really a realistic answer to that question, in my opinion, Kevin.
No, absolutely.
All right. That's where we put him there. We got some news bits and bites we're going to do right after a quick break, and then we're going to have USL radio for today.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
So when we talked yesterday, Kevin, we sort of speculated that that Big Sam was going to get...
And it wasn't necessarily a slap on the wrist, but more a letter of resignation.
Yeah, he was taken behind the barn and handed a shotgun, is what happened.
It's like, dude, you got two choices.
Yeah.
Which one do you take?
Do I pull the trigger, or do you pull the trigger? And he pulled the trigger. So,
the way the report was done, Duane, and with the amount of irrefutable evidence, like the videos, recording of the conversations, which can't be denied, when hindsight, I was thinking, they kind of have no other choice. The guy has to resign.
Yeah, this is the optics of it again, and we alluded to that yesterday. It wasn't so much what he did, although it wasn't ideal ethically. It was questionable. However, as is coming out, this is hardly unique within the world of English soccer. So that alone, as I said yesterday, probably wasn't enough to get him fired. But the fact that he embarrassed the FA, and the fact that it's on tape, and that they knew that if they didn't get rid of him, and it comes down to this too, the whole distraction argument, right? Like, they don't fire him yesterday. Well, they didn't fire him. He resigned. But you know what I mean? The left with the mutually agreed to part terms thing again. The fact that didn't happen, if that didn't happen yesterday, then what you're looking at is the next time England plays, what are the questions going to be? They're not going to be about, whether Wayne Rooney's in the squad. They're going to be about, what the hell, Sam? And that probably was viewed as too much of a distraction for them, Kevin.
No, exactly. So that's going to be interesting to see now. Where do they go from here? Because they thought they had the manager going forward. And now for the second time in over 67 days, England doesn't have a manager.
Yeah, he's going to retire undefeated as England's manager, which I guess,
it's going to become a meme eventually. Sam Allardyce undefeated as England manager, but yes.
Yeah, and whether he's a talented manager at a certain level in England, right? That he's able to take clubs that are sort of in that bottom half of the Premier League mix, that are struggling for survival, and he's able to stabilize them and get them solid up to that 10, 11, 12 type place. So the question is, how long before some desperate chairman who's staring at his team in 17th on February 2nd how long before they go, you know what, I'm going to bring Big Sam. I'm going to plug my nose and I'm going to bring Big Sam in because we know what kind of work he's going to do when he comes here. And, whether they're able to overcome some of the influence, some of the things he said there, particularly as it relates to, how you get around the third party stuff and that's going to maybe sting with some agents. But I suspect for those that are speculating whether or not he'll be back in the game, the answer is yes, because there's a lot of money in the Premier League and they're able to overlook some ethical questions if it's the difference between 17th and 14th. So, or 18th and 14th, I should say. So that's going to be my answer there on whether Big Sam rebounds back. But in terms of England, maybe they've saved themselves from themselves. And, if they're willing to look off the island, then maybe they could do something special there. I'm not sure they are, though, Kev.
No, exactly. What we talked about for Canada example, my example of a Del Bosque or in the future a Pep or a Jose Mourinho, it would be interesting to see if England goes all out in that situation. The salary that Allardyce was given by the FA was over 2.1 million pounds, which is a very high salary, which is one of the biggest. It's one of the biggest coaching jobs in the entire world when you look at it as a manager, especially with the value of the pounds, even though it dropped a little bit. It got back up after the Brexit situation. But when you're looking at that situation where Allardyce, basically the job that he worked his entire life for, after one game is over because of his mistakes, it brings a big void now at England. Do you get that famous manager from outside? You go with a Conte-esque or a coach from Italy like this, or Ranieri, because you've seen him have success in England, or something to that equation. I don't know. That's the question. England usually is a country that will try to have an England manager most foremost, and that will be you remember that Capello disaster? Exactly. So you don't want that to happen again.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. We're going to look at the Champions League yesterday. We didn't really preview it, but we'll look at the games, the results from yesterday, and have a quick look at the games today. One of the biggest difference, we're in Canada, obviously, if you're new to listening to us, but we talk about the American game a lot. But the biggest difference between the U.S. soccer right now and Canada soccer is perfectly summed up in the fact that yesterday there were a couple young kids that were being talked about on both sides of the border. In Canada, we were very excited by a young promising kid that hasn't proven anything, getting a contract signed at Liverpool, and Liam Millar. In the U.S., they were talking about their young wunderkind who's already been capped, getting an assist in the Champions League. How have we figured out how to pronounce his name yet? Does anyone know?
Pulisic. Christian Pulisic.
Yeah, they say it differently sometimes too. Pulisic. So I'm not sure. I think it's sick at the end. That's why I'm avoiding saying it until I know exactly how they want me to say it. But that's the difference between the two of them. Anyway, 2-2, Real Madrid, Dortmund. That was the game that most people were talking about yesterday. Lived up to the billing, late goal there to get the draw. Yep. Madrid not happy, but Madrid's never happy until they win championships. So there you go.
Exactly. Sporting Lisbon versus Liga Warsaw, 2-0 win for Sporting at home.
Yeah, well, that was not to be expected. Warsaw is they had some ugly in the.
Still haven't scored.
Yeah, they haven't scored. There was some ugliness in their first game as well with their ultras breaking barriers and so on and so forth. They had this great display, this great tifo, which is, look who's back in Europe, and it was ominous, and it kind of was an ultra kind of display, and then they decided to actually live up to it, and that's not fun, guys. And I imagine they're not very pleasant people considering some of the history of ultras in Poland. So I'm not too hurting for them to not have scored yet, considering some of their actions so far. Juve with the 4-0 win. We won't talk much about that. Bruges and Copenhagen. I'm a bit surprised by the size of Copenhagen's goal. Although,
well, that opens up the group for Leicester, doesn't it? With Leicester's 2 win and Bruges losing, which was one of the maybe favorite to finish third outside of fourth. Copenhagen just literally destroyed them in that game, 4-0.
4-0. Copenhagen's had some history. They have been in the knockout stage before. Atiba Hutchinson played on that. It's a former team. He had his greatest sort of stretch of his career prior to this last one at Copenhagen. That's where he was the MVP of that league 1 year. So that was something for the Canadian soccer there. Leicester, as we said, the 1-0, and that's the game I watched for the most part yesterday. Yep. They were
Leicester was all for it. Like Slimani, the Porto killer, Dragon Slayer, is 4th goal in 6 games against FC Porto. Scored once again a diving header and 1-0 for Leicester. But it was all for. They could have scored 2-3 goals in that game.
Yeah. At the end, it was a bit much. Porto, I thought, was putting the pressure on in the last few minutes. Leicester sort of maybe the situation and the narrowness of the lead was getting in the end, but they did hold on. Sevilla got the win 1-0 over Lyon, and Red Army lost 1-0 to Spurs. And Monaco
in the Sevilla game, Duane, Sevilla Vieto missed a penalty, skied it. A great opportunity for 2 goals because you might need the goal differential in that group to move on. Lyon almost scored, cleared off the line twice by Sevilla. A very Sevilla type of game where they held the clean sheet and got 1 goal.
All right, and 1-1 Monaco Leverkusen. Those are the results yesterday. That sets up today's matchups.
Yeah, the question I have for you, Duane, how important is the De Bruyne injury for Man City?
It's not ideal. And if you look at some of the most injured players, there was a chart that went out 2 weeks ago, and I retweeted it if you want to go hunt for it in my feed, that shows the most injured players in the Premier League over the last 5 years. And 4 of the top 10 were Manchester City players. Now, that makes me question whether something is going on at the Etihad in terms of their training staff and their training techniques. This is over multiple managers, keep in mind. So it wouldn't necessarily be the managers that would be causing this problem. I just wonder whether maybe there's just something that the trainers are doing wrong that are causing this to happen. It could just be bad luck too. To get directly to your question, obviously he's been their best player this year at times. Aguero is arguably as well, but De Bruyne is certainly living up to his money and earning that money this year. And when we saw him go down at the end of the game against Swansea, we sort of, gulped a little bit. That said, Pep has shown a remarkable ability to squeeze talent out of that entire lineup this year. So we will see today that, ironically, the test is less in the Champions League this week than it will be on Sunday with the matchup against Spurs. So that will be the big challenge there. And certainly they'll want to go 7-0 in the league. But Celtic having lost, speaking of 7-0, I didn't even mean that segue. But yeah, Celtic coming off the 7-0 loss to Barcelona, playing at home. They're going to absolutely want to play with some pride. But, City should be able to handle this game even with the injury, right?
Yeah, no. And the other game in that group, Mönchengladbach versus Barcelona in Germany. Ludogorets PSG, Canadian content on the bench for Ludogorets. Napoli, Benfica, Arsenal, FC Basel, which has been the best team in Switzerland over the last few years. Atletico Madrid, Bayern Munich, a clash of big clubs today in Madrid.
Bayern could potentially be a final matchup. So that is your best game of the day by far. The Mönchengladbach Barca game, Mönchengladbach were very disappointed in the first game with the 4-0 loss to City. So they'll be looking to get some pride back there. Barca is Barca, of course. And Besiktas with Timo Hutchinson playing Dynamo Kiev. So they'll look to continue their role there. Canadian fans will want to maybe watch that one. All the games, of course, on TSN here in Canada. And
sports, some of them on Sportsnet as well, because there's so many.
Yeah, well, they subcontract them to they're all online on TSN. They subcontract a couple to BM.
Okay. Rostov and Doven and Besiktas Kiev, like you mentioned. Those are the game on the docket in the Champions League today.
Yes, exactly. And we do have some games in Major League Soccer as well.
5 games as well tonight.
Including one here in Toronto that I'll be at. The Orlando City TFC. This is a debate. I'll ask you quickly, Kevin. I was listening to one of the good. There's a very good TSA. It's a Sportsnet 590 podcast. Dan Riccio hosts it. Names escape me right now, but it's the 590 official TFC podcast that I do listen to quite often, and it is a decent podcast. You should give it a check out if you're a TFC fan or an MLS fan. But at any rate, they were debating whether quote unquote this was a quote unquote must win for TFC tonight, coming off 2 straight draws on the road. Now, I think that this illustrates a little bit of the change in fortunes of this club, because if they lose it, what's that mean? It means they might be third rather than first. So I don't know if it's a must win, but certainly it would be a very nice win, and certainly a win that you would expect.
If Toronto wins, it might give Orlando the final straw that will break the Lions back. So you never know. Because, if Orlando doesn't get points in that game, becoming a big task to climb. Montreal versus the San Jose Earthquakes tonight. A very important game for Montreal in the Eastern Conference battle. For the Quakes, if they want to stay alive, they have to win as well, because they're in a situation where they're behind Vancouver, but they have a game in hand, and they have a better points per game too, with a possibility of maybe squeezing into sixth position with a few wins before the end of the season. DC United Columbus tonight. I mentioned last week that if you're a Montreal Impact fan, you need to cheer for Columbus. They did the first part of that job by beating the New England Revolution in the weekend on Sunday. Now, on Wednesday, if they beat DC, it'll give Montreal more room to breathe, especially if Montreal can finally get things right and get a win at home tonight against the Quakes.
Yeah, TFC Pitchside is the name of that podcast, by the way. Seattle, Chicago is the late game. Seattle making up one of those two games in hand for that playoff spot. We talked about them earlier. Obviously, they will view that as a must-win, an absolute must-win, in particular because it is in Seattle. There are CCL games as well tonight with FC Dallas playing. Do you want to attempt that one?
I'll go. CD Suchi Tipequez, probably.
Yeah, there you go. It's got a lovely deer on their crest there. That's
yes,
nice.
exactly. I don't know if Suchi Tipequez means deer, probably not. But Vancouver Whitecaps playing tonight against Central FC. Redemption, maybe. Well, they're already through. But if Vancouver can get a win in the CCL, it might be that little band-aid that actually feels soothing over that season-long wound they have in Major League Soccer.
Fair enough. All right, we got to take the break. When we come back, it'll be USL radio time.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, Open Lines After Dark, 5 Rings Daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. Joining us for USL Radio today, the Associate Editor of Indomitable City Soccer, Kyle Kepner. Kyle, how you doing today?
Great, fellas. How are you doing?
Good, Kyle. It is, of course, USL playoff time. We looked at the Eastern Conference yesterday as it locked down. I know you're based in the West, so you probably have a greater influence or greater understanding of the Western teams. But before we get into your area of expertise, do you have any general thoughts on what you've seen in the Eastern Conference this year and who you think might be the favorite on that side?
I can't say who I think the favorite is, but it's pretty exciting to see what FC Cincinnati has done this year. They're certainly not as strong across the field as Red Bulls 2, and there's some interesting aspects about what would happen if Red Bulls 2 were to make the final. That's another conversation. But Cincinnati, if you watch any USL this weekend, watch Cincinnati's home game. It's going to be absolutely epic. I cannot wait to see how many people they pack in for that game. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Do you think they're an MLS market? That's something that people kind of caught people off guard. Where do you fall on that?
I think it's an MLS market, sure, but there's so many variables and timelines, and the important thing to remember with MLS expansion is that MLS is not in a hurry. They don't view this as a race the way so many fans do, and that's a really difficult pill to swallow when you're wanting to move up and be part of the top tier in the country. But for me, if I'm a fan in Cincinnati, I already have a top tier experience. So just get out and enjoy what you've got. It's a fantastic place.
Fair enough. Let's turn our attention to the Western Conference. And I'd like to, before we get into the playoff matchups, let's look at the teams that didn't make it in a general way. And just name a team that you think that isn't in the playoffs that you feel had a season that deserves an attention and might be on the up and up. Is there a team that's not quite there that you think might be a player next year?
I'm gonna go homer and say Arizona United surprised me with their ability to not make the playoffs after some really impressive results and some really impressive individual performances. They have to put the pieces together on defense. I think if they do that, if they let in just a couple fewer stoppage time goals, they're in the playoffs. They had excellent midfield play through Luke Rooney and a great mid-season loan from San Jose, Mateus Silva, and their goal scorers up top, Tyler Blackwood, Chris Cortez, and Long Tan jumping in there too. They were a really, really exciting team to watch at times, and it was extraordinarily frustrating to see how poorly they did in some individual matchups, and especially down the end of the game. But they were terrific at points. Portland Timbers too. Also, I mean, right there on the outside looking in, Real Monarchs. I mean, it's tough to say, and this is a broader conversation, but the MLS owned affiliates, the Monarchs and the Timbers too, they're not necessarily trying to make the playoffs from the broader scheme for overall over the entire season. If you ask their coaching staff, if they're being honest, so it's tough for me to say what the pieces might be. But if I'm looking at an independent team that really long term wants to be in the playoffs, wants to win trophies, I think Arizona United is poised to put the pieces in place over the offseason.
One team that surprised me this season, Kyle, is the FC Toros. Finished second in the Western Conference in their first season. What can you tell us about the Toros and how surprising they have been in their inaugural season in the USL?
They have a terrific relationship with the Dynamo front office. Wilmer Cabrera knows those folks well. He put together a great team. A guy that he coached at the Bradenton Academy, George Malky's had a terrific season moving over to left back. They've had some excellent play all over the field. A couple of Dynamo loanees, but I mean they've been strong at home for one thing. They did not get their stadium up this season, which they were hoping for. I know the weather down there is not cooperating, but man, this is a conduit for what's going to be more common down the years with this relationship between MLS and USL, provided everything else in the pyramid stays relatively the same. You're going to see more of this situation where a hometown USL team is owned. The business operations are owned and operated by somebody local, somebody invested in the community, and the soccer operations can be run well from the MLS outfit. They're going to try this next year in Reno and San Jose, and I think it's a fantastic opportunity. A similar situation could crop up between the Timbers and Boise. So this is an idea that's starting to catch on. This idea that a team can be well run from the business side and engage its fan base and build a local operation while still benefiting from their soccer connection to MLS. I think for a first year, they're doing it very, very well. It's not just their success on the field. It's not just the fact that Toros are number 2 in the West at the end of the regular season. The Dynamo are happy with what they're getting out of this too, and that's the important part for them.
Another team that it was in its inaugural season that I've kept an eye on all season long because of its Canadian content that started with the coach, Mark Dos Santos. The Swope Park Rangers in their first season finished 4th and going to face the Galaxy 2 with home field advantage this weekend. Swope Park Rangers, anything that surprised you about this team this season?
No surprises. We know Kansas City is a first-class organization. Mark Dos Santos, quite a coup for the inaugural head coaching job. Brought in a couple of guys with USL experience, and they've done really well. A couple of young guys have shown for them too. I think it's a lot Coach Dos Santos and his philosophy on the field, but there's such cohesion throughout that entire organization, and they have the benefit of playing of training on the same pitch as the first team. So it's that sporting mentality that goes all the way down, and I'd be lying if I said I was surprised that they put together results on the field.
Kyle, I'm curious. We're going to take a step away from the team-by-team sort of breakdown now to ask this quick question, but I'm curious what your philosophy is in terms of the best approach for those two teams, we'll call them. We have this debate up here whether the all young approach, purely prospect approach, is the right way to do it, or whether you think it's better to mix your prospects in with 2 or 3 guys that are maybe 25, 26 that have some solid USL experience. Well, what is your philosophy? What's the best approach in your mind?
If you have all of those young guys, if they're the only ones on the squad, if they're the only ones signed to the USL roster, and they're not getting any time with the first team, then yeah, you're probably not getting as much out of that experience for them as you can. Yes, they're playing against older, more experienced guys on a lot of the weekends, but they're not getting the day-to-day. So if you have a situation like Rio Grande Valley, where they are playing, I don't know what that is, a 4-hour drive away from Houston, then yeah, you're going to want to mix some guys in that have the experience to lead those guys on the field and in the locker room. But if you have a situation like you have in Toronto or Montreal right now, where the teams are still very, very similar in their approach and their training, and they're all mixed in there together at times. I've talked quite a bit with the FC Montreal organization. I know those guys get to face down the likes of Drogba for once in a while, which is great for them. Then yeah, I don't think it's necessarily as important to have veteran players signed to the roster. So it just depends on their overall strategy, but I definitely value leadership and mentorship among older and younger players.
All right, let's get back to the playoff teams now. One of the interesting teams, we're in Canada, obviously, so we should probably focus on the Whitecaps too, who did get a little bit older this year. Not real old, but a little bit older than they did in their first year, and saw the success for it. Started really fast, tailed off a bit. What's your overall take on the Whitecaps too?
You said it. I mean, they grew up a little bit. They had a lot of the same key pieces from last year. Marco Bustos, Brett Levis, and their ability to work in the youth this year, especially Alphonso Davies, probably the story of North American soccer this year. A really terrific look at what the academy system can and will do in the future. I think like a couple of other teams, they probably a couple of the other MLS-owned affiliates, they probably tailed off towards the end of the season for a multitude of reasons that have to do with supporting the first team. But look, there's so much talent there, and they're obviously doing the academy system right. Alan Koch was a great hire last year. Knows the area so well from his years recruiting for college, and he knows that age bracket. He knows these type of guys, and he's worked really well with the first team, moving guys up. So he knows what his role is, and he knows the goals of the organization overall. Their performances on the field were great this year, and sad to say, I think they're not going to leave Colorado Springs with a win on the weekend, but a really terrific performance by them overall as an organization.
All right, you mentioned Alphonso Davies a little bit. I think that maybe we should expand on that. You said he's one of the best stories in North American soccer, if not the best story in North American soccer this year. Just what, having seen him in the Western Conference there, what was your take on his game, and how high do you think his ceiling is?
It's amazing. I saw him. I live here in Arizona. I was down at MLS preseason in Tucson, and I talked to Alan Koch after Davies got some minutes in a preseason game, and at that point, it was kind of like, oh, isn't this neat? We could get a 15-year-old some minutes, and that's really positive for his development. And then all of a sudden, he's starting for Whitecaps too, and all of a sudden, he's starting for the first team in Champions League, and I'm going, whoa, where is this going? He's bigger than you think he's going to be. He's faster. He's crafty. I don't know what the right thing is to do with him to make sure that he reaches his ceiling, but I have no idea what it is. It's extraordinarily high if this is the way he's acting right now. If he's got the smarts, the maturity to take the coaching that's coming his way, there's no limit for this kid.
Looking at playoff teams, which one would you consider your dark horse in those playoffs? Which one could have an outside chance of reaching the USL Cup?
It's going to sound weird to say just because, they're already in second place at the end of the season, but I'll call RGV my dark horse. They're in the situation where their roster is going to be a little bit in flux, a little bit unpredictable week to week, just because of the MLS affiliation. But I think they can really make a run if they go all the way to the final and Sacramento is still in it. Then they'll play at Sacramento, which is going to be very, very tough. But RGV, I mean, it's a great story, and I think they could possibly take it all the way.
The Red Bulls, too, had a great season, but taking advantage of the disparity of the Eastern Conference to rack up the points to win the Shield for the season. Which one is the favorite in the entire playoff, the Red Bulls 2 or the Republic?
It's Red Bulls 2. It's amazing to say because, again, they have the first team to think about, but they seem to have a robust roster where it's not like, oh, if we lose this player on loan, or if they get an injury or something. No, they're stacked. I can't even tell you who their stars are right now because they've just played so well together as a unit. Great results all down the season. It's hard to say what their weakness is. It's been really terrific. They're a much higher scoring team than Sacramento. So if you put them head to head, then I'm going to pick Red Bulls.
Fair enough. Yeah, Sacramento has always been the story over the past few years. Anything to say that they can't get another star above that crest this year, though?
I think it's theirs to lose in the West, at least. They went through a tough transition. Okay, when Preki left towards the middle part of last season, Paul Buckle came in and he did a couple of things to change things up. He did a couple of things that kept it the same. But really, it took the fans, I think, a long time to see what he was putting together, relative to the amount of time that it's taken him to do it. I mean, really, we're only talking 13 months or so since he came in, and the team is unequivocally his now. His pickups, especially from his native England, and we kind of joked about this and did a post in the middle of the season, who's the most British team in the USL. And at the time we found it was Arizona United, but Sacramento was close behind. They've got this young guy, Wilson Nishaw from England now, who's scoring for them. And they seem to have found a rhythm where finishing the season in first place was not something that they were imagining 2 or 3, 4 months ago. So they're very, very difficult to score on, but their problem all year has been, can we keep the other team off the scoreboard in the second half as well? So if you're going to watch a Sacramento Republic game, we always say watch the second half because that's where all the action's going to be.
Unfortunately, time is always the end. We don't have time to hit every team in the playoffs. There's 16 of them, so we won't do that, even 8 in the Western Conference. But we haven't talked on the OC Blues, haven't talked about LA2, we haven't talked about Colorado Springs really, or the OKC Energy. OKC Energy, that's a tough thing to get out of my mouth here apparently this morning. Of those 4 teams I just mentioned in the Western Conference, which one should we have talked about?
Galaxy 2 is without Jack McBean. He's on loan in England. But Ari Lassiter not getting minutes in MLS right now. I expect him to feature for them. So if they're really serious about avenging their championship loss last season, I expect him to start and feature, and we'll see if the Galaxy can keep putting goals on the board like they did throughout most of the season.
All right, and I just got my MVP ballot in the mail recently, so I'm wondering if I could pick your brain on that. Where would you lean on the MVP in the league?
Oh man, would you? It's embarrassing to say I've not looked at the ballot yet, but I gotta. Man, if I had to pick, I know. If I have to pick just one, it's going to be Sean Okoli in Cincinnati. Man, what a breakout season! Really found his niche, found his stride. A good organization, good coaching for him to thrive in, and I don't think they're the same team without him.
All right, real quick, we have 1 minute left before we'll say goodbye for the day. Obviously, a lot of talk about the possibility of perhaps even absorbing the NASL. Certainly more teams likely coming in the future. What is the long-term possible look of USL? Are we going to be regional conferenced and have an unlimited amount of teams? Do you think there might be 2 tiers of it with some kind of form of movement between them? Where do you think this league is ultimately headed?
3 weeks ago, I would have told you that there's not going to be 2 tiers of USL. Now I have no idea. If they absorb any of these teams from NASL, that's fine. They may start to look at 2 tiers in the future. A lot of that's going to depend on what U.S. Soccer wants the pyramid to look like. There's a lot of speculation on both sides. I personally like the idea in our current setup of there being a league like the NASL that has a different philosophy. If that's failing, then that's fine. We want to make sure that we learn from what works and what doesn't work. But I wish I had a better answer for you. I won't say the USL's going to add unlimited teams, but yes, I think 40, maybe 50 teams is possible. They'll, if the market will support it, they'll just divvy up into regional conferences that keep the travel costs where they need to be, and sky's the limit.
Yeah, sort of look like the PDL if you get up that high at that point, but I guess it works for that. All right, Kyle, anything you want to pump before we say goodbye?
Our numbers guys over at Indomitable City Soccer, Ryan Allen and Evan Eister, put out some great stuff on Monday. They're going to have more for you later this week to preview the playoffs, so check them out.
Kyle Kepner, we thank you again, and we appreciate your insight as always.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And welcome back, and thanks again to Kyle. Kevin, one thing I really like about the USL playoff format, you have the two conferences with the 8 teams in each making it, and it's straight bracket from there. I like the rapid-fire nature of it, and I kind of have always been advocating that Major League Soccer do the same, because I think that it would have the potential to really grab attention to people if you did it bang, 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 bang.
March Madness. Just think about tournaments, single bracket tournaments always work. It's always the answer. It's always the most intriguing format. And no, you don't do it 2 out of 3 at the end of it, because that just doesn't make any sense. You just one game, you're out. You either win or you go home. The no tomorrow aspect of a single bracket tournament gets people going. It's been proven it works, from boxing to soccer, from tournament like March Madness in basketball, college, Frozen Four in hockey, to a lesser extent. Those type of tournament is where the money is. Single bracket, one game, you're done if you lose. That's what works.
24 days from start to finish is the USL playoffs. You start on September 30th, where you have the Swell Park Rangers LA2, and you have the Colorado Springs Switchbacks versus the Vancouver Whitecaps 2 on September 30th. Unfortunately, the only criticism I will give is those games cross over. I think maybe there could be some efforts made so that a fan could watch every game. That would maybe make this a little bit better, but nonetheless, you certainly can watch a lot of this. The tournament continues on October 1st. You have your Sacramento Republic and OC Blues, and you have the Toros and the Energy playing on the same day. The East starts, the East has the 3rd game on that day, the Rhinos and the Charlotte Independents. On October 2nd, you have the Red Bulls 2 versus Orlando B. And on October 2nd, you also have FC Cincinnati and the Charleston Battery. And then you have Louisville. And that is the Richmond Kickers. That is I had to look at the banner there to figure it out for a second, because it was kind of small on my screen. So, yes, that is the final game of the playoffs. And again, it is a straight bracket from there. You do not reseed. They kind of are a little bit territorial, so you kind of have regions that you're coming out of.
Well, it's all because of the seeding. You have number 1, the Red Bulls 2 versus number 8 City B.
Well, you're coming East and West. I mean, East-West in the finals, what I meant.
Exactly, Because so the conference finals, in the final, it's basically the winner of the East versus the winner of the West.
And these games have been on YouTube all year. We've watched quite a few of them. They're fun to watch. The production values vary, obviously, but nonetheless, it's worth your time because it's certainly worth the price of admission because it ain't any cost. Watch that. The final is on ESPN University channel, so I don't quite know how that will work up here. I'm sure that it will be available for Canadians to watch as well.
Probably somewhere, yeah, but you're right. The game, the matchup to look for, Cincinnati versus the Battery in Cincinnati. It's going to be epic with the fan support. Same for Louisville at Slugger Field versus the Kickers. That one is very interesting as well. So those teams are maybe not the favorite because the Red Bulls are very well coached with John Wolyniec. John Wolyniec is working at his craft. I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes an MLS coach sooner rather than later. But for the other teams in the Eastern Conference, Cincinnati, Louisville are maybe the other favorites. At least that's what their season would say.
All right. Let's quickly get I'll ask you two questions. What's your final? What do you think your final is going to be, and what do you hope the final is going to be, Kevin? And you'll go, and then I'll go after that. So what do you think the final is going to be, and what do you hope it's going to be?
I hope it's going to be tough for the Rhinos, even though they finished fourth last year. This year they finished fourth. Last year they won the USL Cup. They went very young this year. Bob Lilly made a big turnover in the season, got a lot of assets, moved on to bigger and better things. He went a little younger, still got great result this season. But Cincinnati could very well become a champion in their first season because not just crowd support. We talked about it the entire season. We have games of close to 30,000 people in Cincinnati, and they will probably be the case for this playoff game. But it's the way they build that team for success right now. Cincinnati, not cheap, getting players with experience, getting players that has potential, but that can provide influence on results right now. And that's what Cincinnati say against a Johnson Battery team that had a tough season tough. They finished sixth in the East, but they had a new ownership this season. They went through ups and downs. How that ownership unfolded, it wasn't necessarily as easy as anybody would think to own a soccer team that was highs and lows. But still finished sixth in the playoff and facing Cincinnati. So that's going to be fascinating.
All right. Look, we should. I'm ambivalent about the Whitecaps too because I don't entirely agree with how they approached this year. I think that they should have done what Toronto and Montreal did and went a little younger. They did go a little bit older. That said, there are a lot of Canadian kids on that team, so I can't cheer against them, even if it is a Whitecaps branded team. You heard it there, folks. Vote first. So I do hope the Whitecaps do well in their matchup. Realistically, however, I am cheering for Louisville in the East because I know a couple of the players, got to know them over the years. So I have a personal connection there, I would say. So I'm cheering for Louisville that way. On the West, as I said, I can't cheer against Canadian kids. I can't cheer against the Canadian coach either. So I hope Swell Park does well. And I know a player on that team as well. So that's kind
Mark
of
Anthony Kay, right?
Yeah, Mark Anthony Kay is for Louisville. And then you have anyway, so in terms of what I think will happen, though, I have this hunch that we might have our first all-two final. And that's something we'll watch out for. I don't know whether people will be happy with that or not. I suspect that the crowd will not make people happy, but I am predicting it will be an all-two final between LA and New York. There you go. That's my prediction.
All right. That's a very bold prediction.
All right. Kevin, that's call it a day on USL Radio and on Soccer Today. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow. Show might be is going to be focused for sure. Daniel Squizzato will be on tomorrow. We'll let you know what the show looks like, but we will be previewing the FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup tomorrow on the show. Until that time, as always, Kevin, I'll let you say goodbye.
Tomorrow, 11 a.m., and have a great soccer and FIFA. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.